You found the house, you made what you felt like was a really strong offer, you're excited, and then you get the call. You didn't get the home. If this happened to you in West Hartford, if you're a buyer in West Hartford, Connecticut, and this has happened to you, you're certainly not alone. But what a lot of buyers don't realize, and even agents for that matter, it's not always about the price. You know, as someone who lists a lot of property, I can't tell you how many situations we have where somebody who maybe had a little bit higher offer lost out to a little bit lesser offer, who lined up with some of these keys that we're going to talk about in this video. I wrote down 6 things that you can do to strengthen your offer, greatly increase those odds of winning. Of course, nothing is a guarantee that I'm going to go over with you in this video, but that little bit lesser offer that kept in mind these 5 or 6 points that I'm going to go over, won the home, and then the buyer agent calls, upset. After the property closes, they see their home maybe was a little bit less, their offer was a little bit more than the one that the seller took, and they're upset about it. They want to know why, and of course, always happy to have these conversations and explain after a transaction happens. But it's because they're missing some of these key points. So stay to the end, because I will say, yes, a couple of these can weigh heavier than others for sellers, for most sellers and listing agents, but packaging them all together is really the key. If you just focus on 1 or 2 and miss the other 4, you're not doing yourself, the best service. So if you have any questions, don't be shy. Myself, my team, we get questions on these videos all the time. You can shoot us a text, give us a call, or shoot us an email. We're always happy to talk. So let's get right into it. First thing I wrote down, and we're going to skip over price, because obviously every seller wants the highest price possible, but we're going to focus in on these other factors besides price that can strengthen your offer and get you there, even if you're not the exact highest and close to it. So first thing I wrote down is pre-approval. Before you mute out on me and start, scrolling on your phone or computer or something else, listen to this one carefully. Obviously, everyone has to have a pre-approval in place before you put an offer in. Everyone knows that. That's no secret. That's not what I mean here. There is a very old school philosophy by many agents, many buyers, many lenders. I've had lenders advise this. Buyer agents told me their lender advised it. Listen to this carefully. Don't put what your offer is on the price. For example, if you're offering $700,000 on a property and you're a buyer that's actually qualified for $1 million, don't put that you're qualified for $700,000 on the pre-approval. This is a very old school technique, because in the past, say pre-COVID, people would say, well, we don't want the seller to know what we're qualified for, because then they're going to try to make us pay more for the house. That is absolutely not true. The market, what a buyer is pre-approved for, has nothing to do with the market value of the home at all, right? And it's actually the exact opposite. One of the seller's biggest concerns, when they're picking the right buyer to go with, right offer to go with, is they're going to pick someone that's going to waste their time and back out of the deal, not get the financing approved, back out on the home inspection, right? So if you're only approved for $700,000 and you offer $700,000, that means one little error in the lender's pre-approval calculations means you're all of a sudden not qualified, right? And that's a concern for any seller selling their home. And as someone who's done this 15 years, I can tell you, even the best lenders, they make mistakes on their pre-approvals. It happens. Sometimes they miss something, right? Now, if you're pre-approved for $1 million and you offer $700,000, if there's a little mistake, you're still probably going to be okay. That's very reassuring to the seller. If you're approved for $5 million, put $5 million on there. Don't lower your pre-approval. That makes you a weaker buyer. And in this market, now more than ever, you want to alleviate every seller concern you can. You want them to know you're a strong buyer. So don't play that game. That is a game of the past. That does not put you in a good position, right? Think about that with your pre-approval. Second thing I wrote down is the inspection. Now, listen, this is a controversial topic. It is very hard for someone, to waive an inspection. There's risk there. You don't know what you're getting into. Even if you're an experienced homeowner, you might be a little bit better off than a first-time home buyer. But it's still a risk, right? That being said, in a competitive situation, if a seller has two offers and they're close and one has a waived inspection, one doesn't, even if it's a little less, 9 times out of 10, that seller's going to go with that waived inspection because it alleviates a concern. It's much less for them to worry about down the road. Most deals, if they fall apart, they're going to be on that home inspection period. That's a big percentage of deals. So now you're taking that right off the map. Now all they have to worry about is financing or what other contingency that you have. So I'm not saying to go ahead and waive it in every situation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong to do. I am saying if you love the house, it's a conversation worth having depending on your knowledge base, depending on what you're comfortable with financially. It's a conversation that should be had so that all of your angles can be looked at. So for some people, it works. For others, it doesn't. Either way is fine, but it's something else you want to consider. Most people know that, especially if you've been in the market long enough, you know people are waived. It's not every deal, by the way. It's definitely not every deal, but it does happen in multiple offer situations still, even today. So next thing I wrote down, financing type or style. Obviously, if you're cash and you show proof of funds, that's alleviating a lot of concerns for a seller. That's going to put you at the height of the list, the top of the list. So if you can go cash, great. But what if you can't go cash? Are there other ways to make the offer stronger? Yes, a lot of folks, they sit down with their lender, they're strategizing what the best financing options are for them. And the reality is, sometimes as a buyer, you might want to take your best financing. It might be best for you personally, and you might have to switch to an above average financing option for yourself that actually looks better in the seller's eyes to help your offer win if you really love the home, right? So the way you set up the financing, again, this kind of goes to the pre-approval. If you're a 5% down buyer, if you're using a conventionally financed home and you're a 5% down buyer, and then the seller has another offer that's a 20% down buyer, both conventional loans, both with strong pre-approvals, which offer do you think is stronger in the seller's eyes? Right? It's going to be that 20% down. Again, it's going to alleviate concerns. There's less for the seller to worry about. Right? Now, if that appraisal comes in a little low or a little off, that 5% buyer has no wiggle room. Where the 20% buyers clearly show there's funds there that they can make adjustments if they want to still make the deal work. The 5% buyer, 5% down buyer, they may still want to make the deal work, but the bank is not going to lend them the money because there's no other options because their cash reserves are so small. So that doesn't mean sellers don't go with 5% down buyers. But we're talking about here is how to make your offer look strong in a multiple offer situation. So you're in multiple offer situations and you're going in, these are some things you can do strategically to make your offer stand out. So specifically to that scenario, if you have the ability to go 20% down, that's going to alleviate concerns for the seller, right? Same thing if you look at, say, an FHA or a VA loan versus a conventional loan. Something else to worry about with those FHA, VA products, the appraisers can be a little stricter. Things like chip paint, missing handrails, those will shut down the financing unless the seller fixes them. Where on the conventional side, those things tend not to come up, so it doesn't shut down the financing part. And if the financing gets shut down, the deal gets shut down, right? So these are things sellers and listing agents think about and have conversations about to make sure the offer they pick is not going to go waste everyone's time and back out of the deal. Sometimes it's even the lender that causes the deal to close, to fall apart, and the buyer doesn't want it to fall apart, right? So the listing agent and the seller will have these conversations. So taking the time to make sure you have the best financing option that the seller is going to appreciate. And by the way, having a conversation with the listing agent or seller goes a long way. Some sellers want the best price. Some are looking for the cleanest terms. Some of these things we're talking about. Some are looking for a combination. Some don't care about 5% down, 20% down. Some do, right? Having these conversations are absolutely critical to making sure that you increase the odds of your bid getting accepted. Because in this market, nothing is guaranteed. It's impossible to guarantee 100% of the time. But by doing these things, you really put yourself in a good position. So next thing I wrote down is the appraisal. This is a big unknown for sellers, because especially if the home's getting bid up, sellers rightfully concerned, well, what if the property doesn't appraise, right? If you have an appraisal rider in there, it gives the buyer the opportunity to back out, where if there's a buyer that says in their offer, hey, we'll cover an appraisal gap if it comes in a little low, we'll take that on. Now that is less for a seller to worry about. If they have two offers that are similar, one is saying, hey, we want to make sure that appraisal comes in okay, and the other offer saying, hey, we'll cover any gap. Obviously, the seller's going to go with the one that covers the appraisal gap. So, again, not saying there's a right or wrong, but if you really want the house, that's a conversation to be had. What does that look like for us in this situation? What's worst case scenario? What's best case scenario? Look at the comps with your agent to see, hey, if this does, what's the lowest the appraisal might come in at based on these comps, to see what your worst case scenario is and if you're comfortable with it. And if you are, maybe that's something you want to consider. And if you're not, you want to play it safe, keep an appraisal rider in there. Just understand it might be something that, the seller leans another direction on. So the appraisal is a big one. Timeline is a big one. And this can go either way. Some sellers, they want a long 90-day closing, or they want it subject to them finding suitable housing, right? If you give them their terms, their long timeline, that's going to make your offer stand out. Some sellers want to close right away. And if you can do that 30-day closing, or if you're cash and you can close in 2 to 3 weeks, that's going to make your offer stand out. So this is situational, a very important question to ask the listing agent to see what the seller wants, and then see if it works for you and your family based on that situation. So meeting their timeline is really important. The last term that I wrote down that definitely affects how a seller perceives an offer, and honestly, this one comes up a lot more than people think, because a lot of the times the offers are pretty close. Like if you have 5 or 6 offers, you'll have your 1 or 2 that are just really low and way off. You'll have 1 or 2 in the middle, and then you'll have 1 or 2 that are right close towards the top, right? And it's literally, sometimes it's $5,000-$10,000 that are, and not that that's not a lot of money, but again, seller's mind is they want to make sure this closes, right? We're looking at all offers that are over asking price, so they're in a good situation either way. They want to make sure it closes. So this last one has certainly shifted sellers a lot more than people realize. It's the deposit. So there's really no rules to any of this stuff. And that's another thing that I don't think everyone quite realizes. If you're going to do an inspection on a property, some people say they want 3 days. Some people say they want 3 weeks, right? And there's no, now I would say most of what I see is 7 and 14 days. So we could say that's standard, if you will, just because of the frequency of it. But there's no rule to that, right? Same thing on deposit. Some of these, say VA loans, FHA loans, they put down $1,000, or they want to put down something very small because they're financing a huge portion, right? Where, a conventional loan where it's putting down 20%, they're going to put down 2 to 5% depending on the price point, right? So the bigger your deposit, the more serious it makes your offer to the seller. Because guess what? If all these contingencies are waived and you're only putting down $1,000, your risk as a buyer to say, you know what, I changed my mind, is a lot smaller than someone who's got $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in the game with a lot of these contingencies waived or strong. Now the seller knows, hey, look, they're giving me a clean offer. They got a lot of money at stake here if they just change their mind. This tells me they're serious, right? So really sitting down and making a good, strong deposit with your offer will go a long way in the eyes of a seller. So again, there's one of these that is not like a magic pill that's going to win it for you every time. But when you put them together, you look at each of these 6 items strategically based on your situation, based on what the seller's looking for, you're really going to put yourself in the best chance to win. So if you have any questions, again, don't be shy. My team and I are always happy to talk. If any of these don't make sense or you want to see how it applies to your situation, or you're just starting with the process, call, text, email, we're here to help.